the Texas legislature passed a bill, and this bill said you can't censor Texans. You cannot censor Texans. Twitter, you fucks. You can't censor our peoples. Can't do it. And Twitter, of course, goes full minstrel. They start, not minstrel, they start flooding all over the place their fucking spurgery. We have our free speech right. We can't be forced to publish the words of some random Yahoo Republican from down in Texas. What if he says something evil about something? What if he talks about having brisket with no barbecue sauce? And you say, that's how we do, motherfucker. You stay away from Texans because Texas doesn't tolerate that shit. And of course, everybody, all the lawyers in the world say, you can't do this. The companies have a free speech right to stop other people from speaking, which is weird when you think about it. Also, Twitter says, we have 230. You can't even sue us or whatever, I guess. I don't know. Ken Paxton's office comes in and says, actually, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this a little bit. Is it really speech to prevent someone else from speaking? I mean, not if you're speaking over them. If you're speaking over somebody, that's speech, right? Like you can interrupt someone all day. You can just walk up and say like some sort of dirty word to kind of break their brain a little bit and get them out of their place. But this isn't that. Twitter isn't speaking by shutting down speech, even though every Twitter lawyer on the planet will tell you that them shutting down someone's speech is speech. Overtly, like just rejecting the idea that how insane that idea is. Like when you really think about how insane it is for Twitter to make this argument, because let's take it to the logical conclusion that no one wants to deal with. If the speech on Twitter is Twitter's speech, which would be the natural following of if the speech removed from Twitter is Twitter's speech, they would have to own the speech that was on Twitter. They have Section 230 protection because the speech that is on their platform is not theirs. It's not theirs. So they go, oh, well, we can just remove this unpalatable speech because it's not ours with impunity, because we didn't say it. And we can also just leave it up with impunity because we have a good faith effort to remove some stuff. So we can just leave it up. And then it's not our speech, it's some other weirdo's speech. So it's all good, right? It's all fine. But think about what that means. That means that all the child porn that sits up there on Twitter's page, it means that all the defamatory statements that are up on Twitter's page, it means that all the doxing and death threats and by the way, I got lots of those lately. Not actual death threats, let's be very clear. I got what other people would call death threats, but what I would call just someone being mad, where they said, you should go off yourself or whatever. Which is fine. Like, Twitter doesn't care about that. Apparently, if I make a joke referencing, something in Minecraft to a friend, I could be banned for life. But if someone directly DMs you and says, kill yourself, Twitter doesn't actually care. They actually said that's not a violation of their terms of service. Whoa, special speakers. Anyway, Twitter owns all of that if it's their speech when they remove it. That would be the necessary converse. Because you can't, like, if removing someone's speech is your speech, then keeping someone's speech up is also your speech. Okay, so that's an insane argument, but it is the argument. It's the argument made by Twitter. It's the argument made by Twitter lawyers. They leave out that whole we own everything else part, and they just try and rely on Section 230. Ken Paxton's office comes in and says, no. You don't get to remove speech and call that speech. That is not speech. That is an act. That is an act. And the act is what we are regulating. We are not regulating what Twitter says. Twitter can go on to their Twitter page and they can post anything they want, right? Their Twitter. They can just post. They have an account. They have like 4 or 5. They get to verify themselves. They can say whatever they want. But their removal of something isn't speech. There's no speech involved in it. There's just an act. The act says, poof, it's gone. And we say that we can regulate the acts of businesses because acts are not protected by free speech. Oh. That's a good argument. That's a really good argument. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals down in Texas agrees. They agreed. In fact, they said, yeah, actually, this guy's right. Twitter is completely wrong. Twitter cannot just willy-nilly ban everybody. And if you've been listening to me and probably some other people, you already know that Twitter can't do this. And I'm not even talking in the broad sense that the Fifth Circuit says. But all these people who say that some company has the right to ban someone for anything is wrong. Because you can't kick someone off Twitter because they're black. Can't do it. You can't kick someone off Twitter because they're gay. Those would be wildly illegal according to the Civil Rights Act. You can't kick someone off Twitter because their national origin is Zimbabwe. Can't do that. So those have been around for a long time. That's like that's the same thing with employment law. It's the same thing with just regular public accommodation law in basically every state. Is that if you open a business that is open to the public, which Twitter is clearly open to the public, and someone walks in your door, you have a duty to serve that person generally without regard for who they are. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't actually agree that this is how it should be, right? Like, I think the Civil Rights Act had its time and place. I think 2022 United States, I think there's enough businesses and there's enough like not caring about racial diversity and stuff like that where we don't really have to have that rule anymore. Personally, I think the market evens it out pretty well. As long as government isn't enforcing it like government was enforcing Jim Crow. People kind of forget that the Jim Crow laws were laws enforced by government. But I think the free market basically, the free as we have market basically takes care of the issue today. And so I think it should be removed. I think any business should be able to refuse business to anybody based on any characteristic or anything that they want, because I don't think most businesses will. I like money, right? Like, it's a really simple idea. But that all being said, we've known forever that you can't just remove people for any reason, because since 1964, you haven't even been able to keep someone out of a shoe store for any reason. Now, you can stop people from doing business with you for no reason. But the question is, when does no reason actually, like, is that a cover for reason? This is getting deep into the law, and it's way too far, because that's not what we're talking about here on Twitter. Although that's part of the reasoning that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals used. But they said, you don't have an unfettered right to silence people's speech. You don't have an unfettered right to stop someone from speaking. You can stop people from speaking in very specific instances. Death threats, child pornography, the stuff that you're not allowed to actually do. Illegal speech. Now, illegal speech is actually typically illegal activity associated with speech, right? A threat of violence has to have enough intent behind it to make it an actual act. The act of the threat is not the speech. The act of the threat is conveying the information to someone for the purposes of causing them apprehension or harm. And how you convey that act, or how you convey that threat to them, is the act, and that is part of the actual criminal activity. Because again, you can't just blanket say, I'm going to kill you is illegal, right? Because I can walk up to a friend of mine and say, I'm going to kill you with a big smile on my face, and there's nothing wrong with that. So you can't regulate the specific words. You can't even say that general death threats are a problem. You have to get into the act. How I convey the death threat to someone is what causes the fear, apprehension, the immediacy, the immediate feeling of potential harm. All of that stuff comes through. So again, this is old law. This is how law is. And some of us have been kind of baffled that this is like when you think back on it, it's like, why hasn't anyone figured this out before? Why hasn't anybody figured out that this was the route to go? But Ken Paxton did. And the the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, that's the Federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, upheld it. So what does this mean? So what this means is that the bill can pass. The bill can pass because this is a facial challenge to the bill. So this bill is unconstitutional on its face. It has to be removed. And Fifth Circuit says, no, they can actually regulate this. Now, what that regulation means and how it will be enforced and all of that stuff remains to be seen, because the first time that Twitter wants to ban a Texan and Texas goes to punish Twitter for it, that's going to be a challenge. But Twitter doesn't want that in general, because that means that every time that Twitter goes to ban a Texan, there could be a challenge to it. Clyde, no, this is not my swing chair room. My swing chair room would be much darker colors and much more fun. This is a hotel room, just a normal hotel room. But anyway, Nick looks like a hostage. Yeah, Ken Paxton's over there demanding that I do nice things, or he's gonna pull his penis out at me. No. But yeah, basically this law gets to go onto Texas's books, and the Texas courts will have to refine down what actually is going on. Like they'll have to trim down the enforcement mechanism. They'll have to carve out the speech exceptions, and they'll have to see where it goes. But the other part of this that is magical, is that the Fifth Circuit goes on to say Twitter cannot claim that they are protected by Section 230. Because they are, or from these bannings specifically, because they are considering themselves and calling themselves a publisher. Not only that, they said, Twitter argued that, how do I word this? How did they word this? Twitter argued that they were the free speech place for free speech people. The Fifth Circuit started doing what Clarence Thomas had already suggested. The interesting thing about how Clarence Thomas suggested this was he suggested that this would probably need to happen through regulation. And what he suggested was sort of, it's called a common carrier. It's a common carrier classification. All right, you think of the telegram service. You think of your landline phone. You think of your cell phone. These are common carriers. All sorts of evil stuff happens by phone, right? People call up their ex-wife, you bitch, I'm going to cave your skull in. Then they drive over and do it, right? They're very terrible. They call up their drug dealer and say, hey, I want 50 pounds of meth, whatever it is. They go ahead and do these things. They do illegal activity through these all the time. A long time ago, the government's like, well, you have to convey all this stuff. So long as you don't specifically know about it, you have a duty to convey these communications and not stop people from communicating. That's part of that. And in exchange for that, we're going to give you immunity from what they do over the phone. You can't sue AT&T. Whoa, thank you, Tin Man. I'll read that in just a second. You can't sue AT&T because someone used an AT&T phone to convey a death threat or a bomb threat or something like that. So that's this common carrier classification for businesses, and we've had it forever. Before telephones, we protected telegram services in the same way. And Clarence Thomas wrote this very nice opinion about how this would possibly be a way to treat the new internet, this internet that no one really saw coming, with communications on like Facebook and Twitters. Basically, these places could be regulated as common carriers. So you have to leave up basically all speech until you have actual knowledge that the speech is actually illegal, not unpalatable, but illegal. And that's a different sort of category. The Fifth Circuit makes an argument that some of us have actually been talking about for a while. They make an argument that Twitter has created in itself the idea that it is one of these common carriers without regulation. That Twitter's actions, holding itself out as a haven of free speech by contract, is a way to get to this sort of exception. What's up, Kurt? And by the way, guys, if you want a more thorough breakdown of this particular case, check out my man Kurt, Uncivil Law, on YouTube. He's in the chat. His channel, you guys know where he is. He's done a breakdown of this case. I haven't watched it yet. Sorry, Kurt. Haven't been watching much YouTube. But that being said, I know it's going to be thorough. It's going to be funny, and it's going to be well thought and well researched. So go check that out if you want like a full breakdown of the case. I'm just giving you the pilot's view. And the pilot's view is right up the stewardess's skirt. And that's where we're looking right now, straight into the vagina of this decision, which says that Twitter has fucked itself. That's what Twitter has done. Twitter has decided to hold themselves out as a free speech platform and then not be one. And then that is why maybe they don't qualify for Section 230 protection on some of these removals. That's magic right there. That is absolute magic. It's lovely. It's what needs to happen. They basically said Twitter is calling themselves a publisher. Twitter is making themselves into a publisher, and as a publisher, they aren't afforded the same level of protection. Now, interestingly, Section 230 itself, by its language, does not make the distinction between publishers and non-publishers, publishers and platforms. But a lot of people have argued that maybe it should. And there's even proposals in Congress to change the law in such a way to make that a little bit more clear. But those haven't actually panned out yet. But they're saying, if you're going to call yourself a publisher, and they very specifically said Twitter is not a newspaper. If you're going to call yourself a publisher, you're not a newspaper, and you're going to advertise yourself as a place for free speech, the free speech place for free speech people, then you can't do this, and you don't get the protection that you think you have. Awesome. Fantastic. It's a wonderful decision. I'm really curious where it's going to go from here. What does it mean? It only applies to Texas right now. That's the critical aspect of this. This is a Texas state law that had a federal challenge. And this decision is only valid within the Fifth Circuit. So courts outside of the Fifth Circuit are not bound by this ruling. In fact, there may be competing decisions outside of the Fifth Circuit on similar ideas. I believe Florida tried to do a similar law. I don't know how close the language was, and they lost in their circuit. That law was deemed unconstitutional. So that being said, what we're setting up for is a Supreme Court showdown. But guess what? We've got this funny conservative majority in the Supreme Court, and they have kind of indicated that they're kind of tired of this bullshit. Kind of tired of this bullshit. And oh, weep, you fucking losers who are so mad about a 6-3 conservative majority. Weep about it. What the fuck is this? I started playing music. Weep, you motherfuckers. Be mad about it. The funny thing, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm going to read super chats in just a second and make sure we get all caught up on those. The funny thing about this the other day, they keep saying, are they actually conservative? Well, Roberts certainly is not, but they keep saying that like it's a bad thing to have a conservative majority on the court. Well, you either have a conservative majority or a liberal majority. This is the economic breakdown of politics. You're going to end up basically, effectively with two parties. So, and I have talked a lot about why you will always kind of end up with two-party reign, even in a multi-party system. It's just kind of how it goes. But you only have 9 seats. You got 9 seats. It's going to break down 5-4, 6-3, pretty much. It was designed with this kind of idea in mind. Like, not specifically, there weren't originally 9 justices, and Kurt and I have talked about this. I think maybe they had planned on a bigger court, more like a big circuit court, where they'd have a bigger pool of justices, and then they'd pull them. But that's not what they did. Doesn't matter. They knew this would be political. These are political appointments made by politicians, and they're approved by a different political party, and they knew that there would be friction over appointing these things. It's how it happened kind of from the beginning, but not to the degree we have today. The division wasn't as stark, I guess, kind of, maybe. That's hard to actually gauge when you really think about it. It's like, we sure the divisions weren't as stark, because they were kind of stark in like 1863. And they were kind of stark in some of those early elections where people are calling other people's children hermaphrodites and stuff like that. But I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The idea that these would be politically contentious seats is not strange. In fact, it goes all the way back to one of my least favorite cases, Marbury versus Madison, which was the quintessential one president trying to appoint people to positions right as he's leaving to fuck over the next guy, and the next guy coming in saying, I don't want to fill those with those idiots. I don't want to do it. And them suing and saying, no, we were appointed. We demand to be instated. That's what Marbury versus Madison was based. These motherfuckers knew from the get-go. These motherfuckers knew from the get-go that any appointments made by a president and then approved by the Senate were going to be contentious appointments that are politically motivated. Of course they were. But the idea with the court, and this is part of the lifetime appointment, is that once they're on there, they would have longevity. The court would be slow to change and hard to change. It would be kind of a ballast against the rocking ship of the House and the presidency, and then the Senate going by timelines, right? It would be a ballast against those things, that these long timelines of justices serving for 30 and 40 years would be something that would keep the rest of it in check. And the idea that they didn't think about this is just fucking insane. It's ludicrous, and it makes me want to take an axe and make a Lucas out of everyone. Anyway, that's disgusting when you think about it.